Brooke's garden was silent, until a furious shout sliced through the air. "Hey, get away from her." 12-year-old Aaliyah, a tiny homeless black girl with dirt on her feet and fear in her eyes, froze in the middle of the billionaire's lawn. She had been dancing, soft little steps, to make the man's disabled daughter smile. But now the girl in the wheelchair, Brooke, looked terrified because her father, Chad, was storming toward Aaliyah like she committed a crime. If this already made your blood boil, tap like, and subscribe so you don't miss stories where justice finally wins. Chad's voice boomed across the perfect grass. "Who told you you could step on my property? Look at you, filthy, barefoot. What are you doing near my daughter?" Aaliyah stepped back, hands trembling. "I am sorry, sir. She looked sad, so I just danced." Brooke's voice cracked. "Daddy, stop. She didn't do anything." But Chad wasn't listening. Anger made him blind. "Don't talk to her, Brooke. People like her don't belong here." Aaliyah's shoulders folded like she was shrinking into herself. But she didn't run. She just whispered, "I wasn't trying to bother nobody." For a moment, Brooke's wheelchair shook. She was trying so hard to move it, but her hands couldn't push fast enough. Tears streaked her face. "Daddy, please don't yell at her. She was helping me." Chad snapped back. "Helping you? She's trespassing." The words hit Aaliyah harder than the volume. He pointed toward the service path. "Go on. Leave. Right now." Aaliyah nodded. She backed away, stepping toward the hedge she had quietly slipped through moments earlier. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She just tried not to cry. But that tiny moment, her silence, her shaking hands, the way she glanced once more at Brooke, felt heavier than Chad's entire mansion. As Aaliyah turned to escape, Brooke suddenly shouted, "Daddy, wait!" But Chad didn't, and Aaliyah disappeared into the green hedge like a shadow that never got a chance to shine. The garden went quiet after Aaliyah disappeared, but the silence didn't sit right with Brooke. She stared at the hedge, chest rising and falling, breath shaking the way it always did when she felt helpless. Her hands hovered over her wheelchair controls, but her muscles refused to cooperate. She hated that feeling, being trapped while someone else took the hitman for her. Inside the mansion, Chad shoved the patio doors open, still muttering under his breath. Unbelievable. Kids like that wandering around, someone needs to take responsibility. Mrs. Langford, the longtime housekeeper, looked up from polishing silver. "Everything all right, sir?" Chad waved her off. "Just handle the trespasser." Brooke's voice followed him in, weak but sharp. "You scared her." Chad turned. "She shouldn't have been here in the first place." Brooke lowered her eyes. "Daddy, she made me laugh." That froze him. It had been almost a year since the accident. The crash that broke Brooke's spine, shattered her confidence, and dimmed her spirit. Laughter, joy, even simple smiles had become rare. But today, a barefoot stranger had brought them back. Chad rubbed his temples, frustrated at feeling guilty. "Brooke, I know you think she meant well, but it's dangerous letting strangers near you." "She wasn't dangerous," Brooke whispered. "She was kind." Langford paused in the doorway, watching Chad closely. Maybe the girl just needed kindness too. Chad ignored that, or tried to. That night, he stood in his study, staring at the massive window overlooking the garden. The moonlight hit the same patch of grass where Aaliyah had danced. He replayed the scene again and again, the fear in her eyes, the way she stepped back, how she didn't fight back even once. Something pulled him toward the security monitor. He tapped a button, and the footage from earlier flickered to life. There she was, Aaliyah slipping through the hedge, looking around cautiously, wiping her face, then tiptoeing closer to Brooke. And then she danced, not a polished dance, but a sweet, clumsy, joyful little shuffle. Random spins, light skips, nothing rehearsed, just pure heart. Brooke's face in the video. She lit up, she laughed, her shoulders relaxed. Her hands tried to mimic the rhythm. Chad leaned closer to the screen. Then he saw something he didn't notice before. Brooke's toe moved. A tiny twitch. Barely anything. But it moved. He exhaled sharply, whispering, "God, what have I done?" He replayed it again, then again. Each time, his face hardened, not in anger, but in regret. Down the hall, Brooke wheeled herself slowly toward his office door. "Daddy?" Chad turned, his voice softer than before. "Yes, sweetheart." Her eyes were glossy. "Will she come back?" He swallowed. Hard. "I don't know," he admitted. But the truth he didn't say was louder. He wished she would. The next afternoon, something strange happened. Brooke was in the garden again. Her wheelchair facing the hedge Aaliyah disappeared into, and she whispered, "Please come back. I need you." And before anyone could understand how, a tiny shadow moved behind the leaves. If this happened in front of you, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you stand for fairness, hit subscribe. Brooke leaned forward, eyes wide with hope. "Aaliyah?" The hedge rustled again, small fingers gripping the branches. And then that same tiny girl stepped through barefoot, oversized shirt hanging off one shoulder, hair messy from sleeping outside. Aaliyah didn't walk far. She stayed near the hedge like she was ready to run. "I just want to make sure you weren't mad," she said quietly. Brooke shook her head so fast her curls bounced. "Mad? You made me feel like I wasn't broken." Aaliyah stared at the grass. "Your dad didn't like me being here." Before Brooke could answer, the patio door slid open. Chad stepped out and froze. Aaliyah tensed like she expected him to shout again. But this time he didn't, because he wasn't looking at her fear. He was looking at his daughter's face. Lit up, alive, the same joy he hadn't seen in nearly a year. Brooke whispered, "Daddy, please don't yell at her." Chad swallowed his pride. "I'm not yelling," he said quietly. "Aaliyah, can we talk for a second?" Aaliyah hesitated, but nodded. He crouched to her height, something he never did for anyone, and said, "I watched the security footage. You helped my daughter today, more than any doctor has in months." Aaliyah blinked. "I just wanted her to smile." "She did," Chad said, "because of you." Brooke rolled forward, her voice trembling with excitement. "Daddy, can she stay for a little? Please." Aaliyah's eyes flickered with something between hope and fear. "No one ever wants me around," she whispered. "I'm used to going." Brooke reached out and grabbed her hand, gently, but with more strength than she had shown in months. "You can stay with me." Aaliyah exhaled slowly, like she had been holding that breath her whole life. For the first time, she stepped away from the hedge and toward them, not because she felt safe, but because she finally felt wanted. Chad wasn't used to feeling unsure, but standing in front of Aaliyah, he chose his words like they were fragile. "Aaliyah, how long have you been living out there?" She shrugged one thin shoulder. "Couple weeks, maybe more. Sometimes behind the bus station. Sometimes by the laundromat. Depends where nobody chases me away." Brooke's face fell, and Chad felt something twist inside him. The kind of guilt a man feels when he realizes he judged someone who had nothing. "Have you eaten today?" he asked. Aaliyah shook her head quickly, embarrassed. "I'm okay. I can go." Brooke's voice wobbled. "No, don't go. Daddy, can she eat with us? Please." Chad hesitated, not because he didn't want to help, but because this was new for him. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, she can eat with us." Inside, Mrs. Langford nearly dropped her dish towel when she saw Aaliyah step through the door. "Lord have mercy, child, come here," she whispered, guiding her gently to the kitchen island. Brooke rolled in behind them, smiling so wide it looked like sunlight coming through clouds. Soon, a warm plate of fried chicken and mashed potatoes sat in front of Aaliyah. She stared at it like she wasn't sure it was real. "You can eat," Chad said. She picked up the fork, cautious, slow, as if expecting someone to snatch the food away. Brooke leaned closer. "Do you like it?" Aaliyah nodded, chewing softly. "It's good." Chad watched her, silently wrestling with the fact that this little girl had been eating scraps from dumpsters while his home wasted more food in a day than she got in a week. After dinner, Brooke took Aaliyah to the sunroom, the place she hadn't visited in months. "Look," Brooke said, pointing at the shelves. "These are my favorite books." Aaliyah walked slowly across the soft rug, touching each spine with gentle fingers. "You have all these?" Brooke nodded. "You can read any of them. With me." They sat on the floor together, Brooke lying on her side, Aaliyah cross-legged, flipping through colorful pages. Brooke giggled at a silly animal drawing. Aaliyah giggled with her. The sound echoed through the mansion like something waking up after a long sleep. From the doorway, Chad watched them quietly. He didn't step inside. He didn't interrupt. He just stood there, eyes softening as he saw his daughter, the same daughter who had barely spoken for months, laughing again. Mrs. Langford leaned toward him. "That little girl didn't just cheer her up," she whispered. "She brought your home back to life." Later that night, Chad walked past the guest room and saw Aaliyah inside, sitting on top of the blankets, legs pulled to her chest. "You trying to sleep?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "It's too quiet." "Quiet could be good," he said. She blinked up at him. "I can stay tonight." He nodded. "You can stay, as long as my daughter wants you here." Aaliyah swallowed, relief softening her whole face. Then she whispered something no one had told her in years. "Thank you for not throwing me out again." Chad's voice cracked as he answered. "Thank you for coming back." 3 days passed like a quiet miracle, until a white envelope arrived at the mansion gate. Chad opened it, expecting bills, but instead, his face drained. It was from Child Services. Someone had reported a homeless minor living illegally on the property. If you believe talent can silence every insult, share this video. And to everyone watching from the US, UK, and Canada, your voice matters. Chad took a long breath, staring at the letter while standing alone in the foyer. Aaliyah and Brooke were in the sunroom, laughing over a coloring book. He didn't want that sound to disappear. Not again. Mrs. Langford approached slowly. "What's wrong, sir?" He handed her the paper. "They're sending someone for an inspection. They want to know why a child with no guardian is living here." Langford frowned. "Well, because she belongs here now." Chad nodded, but fear flickered through his eyes. "Tell that to the state." In the garden, Aaliyah sat under the oak tree while Brooke excitedly showed her drawings. Chad stepped outside, trying to keep his voice steady. "Aaliyah, can I talk to you?" She turned, sensing something was wrong. Did I do something bad?" Brooke immediately shook her head. "No, you didn't." Chad crouched beside her. "It's not your fault. Someone reported you. Child Services wants to come talk." Aaliyah's body went stiff. Her voice shrank into itself. "They're gonna take me, right?" Chad swallowed. "Not if I fight for you." Aaliyah looked at him like she didn't believe anyone would fight for her. "People don't keep me," she whispered. "They help for a day, then I go." Brooke rolled closer. "You're not going anywhere." Aaliyah's eyes glistened. "But I don't have a mom or a dad or anyone to say I can stay." Chad's jaw tightened. "Then I'll be the one to say it." Later that afternoon, he called his lawyer, pacing across the living room. "I need emergency guardianship paperwork," he said. The lawyer sighed. "This won't be easy. No records, no birth certificate, no ID. I don't care," Chad snapped. "She saved my daughter. She changed this house. That's enough for me." After the call, he found Aaliyah sitting in the guest room hugging her knees. He sat beside her quietly. "You scared?" She nodded without looking up. "If they take me, will Brooke still smile?" Chad's chest tightened. "Not like she smiles with you." She looked at him then, really looked at him, with hope fighting against heartbreak. "You'll fight." He placed a hand over his heart. "With everything I've got." That evening, Chad organized the entire house. Cleaned rooms, fixed paperwork, prepared statements, met with tutors, planned medical checkups. Every detail sharpened with purpose. Brooke rolled to him in the hallway. "Daddy, are we going to lose her?" He knelt in front of her. "I'm not letting that happen. Not while I'm breathing." For the first time since his wife died, Brooke saw a fire in him. Not anger, not frustration, but determination. Aaliyah hadn't just brought laughter back into the mansion. She had brought courage. And now, For the first time in years, Chad felt like he wasn't just protecting his daughter, he was protecting a family. The morning of the home inspection arrived with a heaviness none of them could ignore. Even the air in the mansion felt stiff. Brooke stayed near the front window, hands pressed together, watching every car that passed by. Aaliyah sat beside her, feet dangling off the couch, twisting the edge of her borrowed hoodie between her fingers. At exactly 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Chad straightened his shoulders, exhaled once, and opened the door to a woman in her 50s wearing a gray suit and carrying a clipboard. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes." "Please, come in." "I'm Ms. Porter with Child Services." As she stepped inside, her eyes scanned the hallway. The polished floors, the framed photos, the quiet elegance of the billionaire's home. But she wasn't looking for beauty. She was looking for faults. Aaliyah stood slowly as Miss Porter entered the living room. "Hi, sweetheart," the woman said gently. "Can we talk for a moment?" Aaliyah nodded, though her shoulders tightened the way they always did when she expected something to be taken from her. Miss Porter sat across from her. "How long have you been staying here?" Aaliyah swallowed. "A little while. And before that, outside, different places." "Did Mr. Carter ask you to stay?" "No. I came to help Brooke." She was sad. "And you feel safe here?" A brief pause, then the tiniest nod. "Yes, ma'am. More than anywhere." Porter wrote something down, her expression unreadable. She then turned to Brooke. "And you? How do you feel about her staying here?" Brooke didn't hesitate. "She's my best friend. She makes me want to get up every day." "You feel better with her around?" Brooke nodded, voice small. "She helped me move my toes again." Ms. Porter blinked at that. Then it was Chad's turn. They moved his office. Door closed for privacy. "Mr. Carter, why are you fighting to keep her? Most people in your position would avoid this kind of responsibility." Chad let out a steady breath. "Because she saved my daughter's life. Twice, once physically, once emotionally. You understand guardianship is permanent?" "Yes." "You understand it requires schooling, medical care, legal responsibility, background checks?" "Yes." "And you understand she has no paperwork, no past records, no verifiable history?" Chad leaned forward. "Exactly why she needs someone who won't walk away." Ms. Porter studied him carefully. "Most men don't speak like that." "I'm not most men anymore." After the interview, she walked the house, taking notes. Aaliyah followed Brooke down the hallway, whispering, "What if she says no?" Brooke's voice trembled. "She won't. Daddy won't let her." But Aaliyah wasn't convinced. She believed adults before, and they always changed their minds. MS. Porter finally stepped onto the back porch to speak, with all three together. She closed her folder. "I can't give a final decision today, but I will say this. I don't often see a child this deeply connected to a home." Aaliyah's heart stuttered. That wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. When Porter left, the house felt as if it had stopped breathing. Aaliyah stayed silent, sitting on the bottom stair with her knees pulled close. Brooke rolled next to her. "You're staying." "I know you are." Aaliyah's voice cracked. "You don't know that." "I do," Brooke insisted. "Because you're family." Chad stepped forward, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. "You hear me?" he said quietly. "I'm not done fighting." For the first time in years, his voice wasn't the voice of a billionaire, but the voice of a father. The next 3 days moved slower than winter. No one said it out loud, but every hour felt like waiting for a verdict that could break them. Aaliyah barely slept. Brooke kept her drawing markers beside her bed in case Aaliyah woke up scared. And Chad, he paced the house at night like a man guarding something precious. On the 4th morning, the doorbell rang. Aaliyah froze on the staircase, fingers gripping the railing. Brooke wheeled beside her, whispering, "It's okay. It's okay." Chad opened the door. Ms. Porter stood there, clipboard under her arm, expression unreadable. For a long moment, she didn't speak. The silence pressed against the walls. Then she stepped inside and knelt in front of Aaliyah. "Aaliyah," she said softly, "I reviewed everything. Your interview's the home, the way this family cares for you. Aaliyah's breath trembled. Am I staying, or do I have to go? Miss Porter's serious face softened the tiniest bit. You're staying. Aaliyah sucked in a breath, so sharp it almost sounded like a sob. Brooke let out a cry of joy, throwing her arms around her. Chad closed his eyes for a moment, just a moment, to keep them from watering. You'll remain here under Mr. Carter's guardianship, Porter continued. We'll finalize full custody in the coming weeks. Congratulations, all of you. Aaliyah didn't move. She couldn't, not until Chad knelt in front of her and placed his hands on her shoulders. You hear that? He whispered. You're home. The word home hit her harder than any insult ever had. She blinked fast, eyes glossy, voice barely there. I never had one. Brooke grabbed her hand. You do now. Later that evening, the mansion felt different, lighter, warmer. Aaliyah sat on the back porch with Brooke, staring at the sky as dusk painted the garden gold. She held a small drawing Brooke made, the two of them hand in hand and Chad behind them, all smiling. Aaliyah whispered, Why me? Brooke nudged her shoulder. Because you danced. She giggled softly. I wasn't even good. You didn't have to be, Brooke said. You just had to be you. Inside, Chad watched them from the doorway, two girls who had saved each other in different ways. He wasn't sure if they understood yet, but he did. Family wasn't something you were born into. Family was something you fought for. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, Chad didn't feel like a man who had lost everything. He felt like a father,